Hello, this is going to be a shortened version or shortened lecture of the evaluation process in program planning and in recreation and leisure services. I've got a PowerPoint up if you want to follow along. It is available on Blackboard, and I'll refer back and forth to that PowerPoint to help clarify or explain some of the concepts and the processes of evaluating if a program is successful, as well if the leisure services provided is successful. The first one we want to talk about is kind of why evaluations are important and why we do them. A lot of times we do them not necessarily for our own gratification, but because we are required to. A lot of times if you're in a nonprofit or a public agency, you're going to have a board that's going to overlook you, and they're going to want to see statistical analysis of the program, what the benefits are, more than just saying, hey, a lot of kids showed up and had a lot of fun. But what do they really get out of that? And so that's what we want to focus on. And so one of the reasons is we have those third-party agencies like a board of directors, board of aldermen. They'd all be a part of that. We also have sometimes a third-party funding agency, the Land and Water Conservation Grant. A lot of times if you are awarded that grant for a specific program, for example, they've been doing a lot lately with the fishing derby for disadvantaged youth. And if you were one that got awarded that grant and provided a fishing derby, you would have to report back to them through some type of evaluation effort of how successful that event was. And then as mentioned before, your supervisor also wants you to do it for that own sake. The problem with that, sometimes programmers feel that people are going to nitpick at them, and sometimes they feel as though they may not be looking at it from a positive side, but what can we fix? What are they doing wrong type of attitude. And as a programmer, we can't think of that way. And so what we should be thinking as is three different things. We want to establish accountability for ourselves. We should want that. It's going back to the basic philosophy of leisure, is that it should be from an intrinsic value. We want to do well at our job, and so we should want to have that accountability for ourselves. Another thing is that we want to understand what's going right and wrong with our own programs, and what can we refine, what can we improve, or in a bigger sense, what can we add to the programs that we already offer. And the last one is from an organizational management standpoint. Basically, are we doing everything we need? Is there enough swim programs? Is there enough sport programs, enough art programs? And if there's not, how do we add to that? Or if there's too many, we need to know that. The only way we can know that is through doing some type of evaluation of those programs and those that participate in those type of programs. And so that's what we need to focus on as programmers, are those three aspects. There's two different types of programs or evaluations that we do. One is called the formative evaluation, the other is a summative evaluation. The formative is that aspect of ongoing evaluations while the program is happening. And so you implement a program, you see something's wrong at that moment, you step in and fix something right then and try to make that work. A simple one would be if you had an arts and crafts program and you didn't have enough crayons. Formative evaluation is realizing, hey, I don't have the crayons, and you go and get more crayons and bring those back for the participants. Whereas a summative evaluation is everything that happens at the very end. So the program is complete, and then you actually get together with whoever's involved with that program and do a final analysis or evaluation of what just happened. And a lot of times the summative is dependent on answering the questions in your goals and objectives of why you're offering the program. So a lot of times you can't answer those summative questions until the program is actually ended. So you got formative is ongoing during the program and trying to make changes before the program ends, and the summative is at the very end when the program has completed, and then you do an overall summary or evaluation of that program. There's 5 P's that we need to understand from evaluation, and we call them the 5 P's just because they're the areas in which you can evaluate. One is participants, program, place, policies and administration, and personnel. And so what you can do as a program or a leisure service professional is that you might want to survey the participants. You want to know if their skills increase, if they have positive attitudes, what kind of outcomes they received, as well as what do they think we should add. And so you can survey or evaluate from the participants and get that feedback. The program, you can also evaluate what type of program it was, as far as that could be from participants as well as from in-house, as far as saying, did this program run well? What was the leadership? What kind of marketing did we do for it? Did we handle all the risk management aspect of it? Another part of the evaluation process, the third P is place, was the facility or the area, the site, was that accommodating for the program or the services that you provide? Policy and administration is looking more from a administration standpoint, so it's going to be looking more at the cost analysis. It's going to be looking at a budgets type of setback or a viewpoint, and so looking at that cost effectiveness. And last one is personnel. Did you have the right people in the right place? That's basically what it's looking at. Again, this type of evaluation is going to happen in-house, usually by a supervisor, similar to the policies administration, but you can also look at it as a way to, this person needs to be trained more on the rec track or the registration programming, as well as this person needs to be trained a little bit more on officiating, whatever that might be. So you're looking at personnel and where they might be succeeding as well as lacking, and where you can fix that or where you can actually utilize those personnel better. So those are what we call the 5 P's of evaluation: participants, program, place, policies / administration, and also the personnel. When we need to be aware of, when we do an evaluation, we want to be aware that our tool or the method that we use is reliable and also valid. And these are always two concerns that we have in leisure services and in any type of research that's being done. If you refer to the slide number 5, this talks a little bit about it, and realistically the pictures seem to help explain this the best. And so if you look at the PowerPoint slide, there's going to be 4 targets there, and those explain what reliability and validity is. So reliability is basically, we're looking at consistency. Are people answering the question in the correct manner? They understand it correctly. Whereas validity is also looking at, again, go back to reliability. So it's one thing is finding people that actually know that part of programming. So I put on the PowerPoint slide asking people about sports that don't know sports. If you go and ask somebody what do they think about playing basketball, but he's never played basketball or seen basketball before, he's not going to give you a very reliable answer about the game of basketball. And so we want to make sure we're being reliable. So if you can see that first target there, it's all pointed in one spot on that target. That's very reliable, where everybody's answering very similar to other people, so we understand that's true. Validity is how accurate our responses are, and so they might be answering the question consistently or reliable, but it's not valid in the sense that it's not giving us the responses that our tool or the evaluation method that we're using should be giving us. Again, so you can look at the pictures again. They have another picture of spots all over the place where it's balanced, which means it's valid. People are giving a very balanced response. But again, it's not reliable because there's spots all over. When we put neither reliable or valid, you can see that all the answers are above or on the top half of that target. And so it's not reliable because it's not on a balance, and as well it's not valid because it's not hitting in the middle where where we want to be. And then you can kind of see the last one shows that we're both reliable and valid because all the answers are right there in the bullseye, and that's what we want to do when we do some type of evaluation. So there's several different models of evaluation that we use in certain ways to go about evaluating our programs, our services, facilities, personnel. And I'm just going to run through them quickly. You can follow through on the PowerPoint as they are listed there as well. And so one of the first ones we use is we want to look at what's the important aspects of our leisure services or important performances. This is usually an evaluation tool or model used to rank what is most important to the patrons. And so we might have a survey question that has a Likert scale from or a scale of 1 to 9, and they have 9 things to rate. Rate your favorite thing to your least favorite thing, and it could be your favorite program services. You might have baseball, softball, soccer, arts and crafts, gymnastics, whatever it might be, and the participants would rank them from 1 to 9. So that's an important performance evaluation. So that helps us realize what our customers or our patrons really want, and so that's what we need to be focused on that aspect about it. We see this used a lot when we are trying to expand, when we're doing a strategic planning and long-term planning where we want to add new facilities, new personnel, and so we'll ask those type of questions saying excuse me, how important is it to have a new facility? How important is it to have a gym, a swimming pool, a track, fitness center, and on and on and on. And so we want to decide, according to what the feedback is from our community or our participants that we serve, what is the most important thing to them. And so that's a lot of way, the importance of performance is a great way to establish what type of park, if we ever get a new park, what kind of park are we going to have? We're going to have a sports park, dog park, just green space, lake, natural setting, those type of things. You know, we can go off of what we feel is needed, but in order to truly serve our public or the people that we are serving, we need to get their feedback, and importance of performance is a great way to do that. Next one to go about would be the satisfaction-based evaluation. So this is tied to our goals and objectives, but it's basically the idea of what are our patrons getting out of it. Are they satisfied with our performance? Are they satisfied with our program? So this is going to be a little bit more specific to our programs, but it could also be expanded out to be the full department or agency. There's basically, it's usually, again, it's a Likert scale, and you're doing 1 through 5, very satisfying to not very satisfying. And there's 10 areas that we go through. I'm just going to go through these really quick. But one is achievement. How well did you think you achieved the goal, or how well did you do in this type of activity? We could also look at physical fitness. How well did this group fitness program increase your cardiovascular fitness levels? Social enjoyment. Did you feel that this senior trip going to the winery was a social enjoyment? How satisfied were you with that activity? A family escape. Did you provide enough green space for picnics and playground area? The environment. Again, did you have enough? Were you bothered by too many people? Could be one. Did you feel that the amount of green space that we have is congruent with providing a natural setting within the city? Risk. Did we satisfy your needs of making sure we were providing a safe environment? Family togetherness, relaxation, fun, and autonomy. So those are some other ones, and I kind of just went through those last ones kind of quick to help you kind of fill in the blank. You can lead that based on what I said on the other one. So satisfaction-based model is a great one. As I mentioned on the PowerPoint slide, not all programs will receive a high rating for each area, but depending on the program goals and objectives, this evaluation method will give great insight in whether the program is meeting the satisfaction needs of the participants or if it's not. And so depending on what your, because a lot of times your goal might be just to have fun. And so you're going to be looking at that fun aspect and not going to worry about if you got rated very low on environment. You might not even include that in the evaluation. Realistically, you wouldn't. And so you can kind of pick and choose out of these areas, and match them up to what your goals and objectives were when you started the program. The next one is a service hour evaluation. We use this a lot of times in leisure services just to get a quantifiable number. And so we just want the output of what we provide. We're not looking necessarily at attitudes or achievement, but we're looking at just the output that we have. And so an example of that would be an after-school program. We have 40 children for 2 hours. We provided 80 hours of service. And so we just do that 40 children times 2. And so this is a great thing that people will use. It's very easy statistics, but the downside of it is obviously we don't get a very clear picture of was it satisfying or not. Yeah, a lot of people got participating in the activity, but was it a good activity? And so sometimes you have to look at things a little bit more clear or use a different model. Sometimes with this service hour evaluation, you want to look at the demographics, because a lot of times that will give you a better picture of who you're serving and who's utilizing your programs. For example, you can look at age and gender. So you can say out of those 40 children, we had 10 that were between the ages of 5 and 7, and then we had about 30 that were from the ages of 8 to 12. We also realized that we had about 30 females as opposed to 10 males. And so by just adding those demographics, you can actually paint a clearer picture of what you're doing and what type of service you're providing. And the next one is this goals and objectives. It's otherwise known as a process evaluation, and basically it's looking at two things. It's looking at how is the program designed and implemented, and then how does that meet the operation outcomes or the outcomes of that program. And so the design means how many staffing people did you use, what program format did you use, what kind of supplies did you think you needed to provide for this, and what kind of facilities did you have. So those are all the program design aspects that go into it. So we're looking at those aspects there, and we're trying to match that up and hopefully get to the end result or the goals and objectives that we first established. And so we're looking at those specific outcomes. So some of those outcomes might be everybody plays everyone, and so you see that with a round robin tournament. And so if you're playing a round robin tournament where you switch opponents as they go around depending on the games, if everybody doesn't play everybody, that's a concern. And why was that? Was it because you didn't have enough facilities? Did you not have enough time? So again, it helps you explain what's going well as what's not going well. I also have one that's just having fun. Do people have fun? So you can use this as goals and objectives by utilizing that and making sure that there's a good ratio of instructors or adults to the participants. You can also look at increased cardiorespiratory fitness. So again, if you have group fitness and you have only 5 people showing up to that program, according to the goals and objectives process evaluation, this might not be meeting the standard that you would like to have. And so in order to increase that cardiorespiratory fitness, you might want to do a different time, a different facility, or maybe you notice that your facility is too small, you can only have 5 people. So again, that helps evaluate a little bit of what you're doing. So that's called the process evaluation form. And the last one that we look at is this triangulation model. And basically all this is just using several of the methods that we already talked about and combining them for one to get a very clear picture or different perspectives of what we're actually doing. So, you know, for example, how to improve front desk customer service. And so the 3 ways you could do that: we could do it as a focus group, we could use it as a survey, and we could also use a suggestion box. Those different efforts or designs will give us a clearer picture of what we're actually doing and give us a full view of what the customers would like us to do as well. So this, obviously, the triangulated data gives us obviously the clearest picture that we can have. Now when we talk about sampling, or when we go out, so we pick our model and we go out and we start to sample, there's 2 different types of sampling procedures. There's one that's called the random sampling, and there's another one called the non-random sample. Now a random sample, basically all that means is that everybody has an opportunity to be picked. So if there's 500 people in your community or your program, 1 in 500 should be the odds of that individual being picked to be evaluated for this program. That's called a simple sampling. So, you know, you put everybody's name in a hat, you pick out the 5 or 10 that you want to evaluate, and that's a simple sample of a random sampling. Another one's called a stratified sampling, and this is basically you have the 500 people, but you're looking you get a little bit more specific, and you want to look at maybe just the gender. So out of the 500 people, you know, or you want to have you want to just look at the females, yeah. And so the stratified sampling would mean that, again, you group it a little bit more, so you have that subgroup, so just females within the 500, and then you do a random sampling out of that to those, say it's 300 out of 500 are females, so now you do a random sampling of just those 300, and that's called a stratified sampling. We also have a cluster sampling, and we see this on a bigger stage usually. For example, you see this in education quite a bit, so we'll apply it to leisure services in our community education program. So there's several education institutions that have that type of program happening. Well, if we want to understand what is, how are those programs going, or better yet, how does people feel about their pay scale? If we're looking at employees at community education or outreaches that usually involve the after-school program, leisure services, we can, instead of surveying everybody that's in the St. Louis area and looking at all those people, because that would take a lot of time, instead we might want to just look at the Rockwood School District and survey those people. It's still random, we just pick that person randomly, or just that cluster, but it's still random sampling because we're not surveying everybody, but we're looking at just that cluster. And then I should say, instead of just surveying everybody, we pick, or randomly pick, one group, and that would be Rockwood, would be the group that we pick. The non-random sampling, there's 3 of them as well. There's one that's called the, basically non-random is a criteria base, and so you're looking at, you want to get specific people. And so one is called the systematic sampling, and all this is it's the 9th person, or the 9th person. So if you're at a special event and people are coming through one gate and you want to do a systematic sampling, you might say every 3rd person I'm going to stop and talk to. Okay, so every 3rd person, 4th person, whatever it might be, as long as you do that consistently. So every 3rd person I'm going to talk to and give them this evaluation. That's called a systematic sampling procedure. Another one's called a purposive sampling, and all that is basically you want to pick people that you know have insight to this. A lot of times the mayors of public recreation will do this. They'll go out and they'll pick specific people that they feel will give us the greatest insight for our program. And so a lot of the boards that we see, not Board of Aldermen, but appointed boards by the mayor, usually will have this type of sampling procedure. So if you want to do get someone to help with a parks program, you might want to grab some people that know something about parks. You might get somebody that's a professor, you might get somebody actually in the Parks and Recreation Department, you might also get somebody else that has a for-profit recreation agency. Bring them all together so they can help us give insight into what's happening and give us a more clear picture of what we should be doing in leisure services. So that's a purposive sampling. And the last one is convenience sampling, and this is just taking whoever you can get, whoever's the most accessible and the easiest ones to grab. And so that's called a convenience sampling. Okay, the other, moving on, there's a couple different types of data that we should be collecting, and the 2 that we have is one called qualitative and the other one is quantitative. And so qualitative is basically, it's non-numerical, and so you're trying to get opinions, you're trying to get insight from different people on their feelings or their attitudes. You're not necessarily worried about you're not necessarily, so my daughter's going to be a part of this obviously. So you're not necessarily worried about getting quantifiable data or numbers. You want to actually get somebody's own opinions, and a lot of times this happens when you want to get very down to the meat and bones of it. And so it's very open-ended type questions, and you can also add follow-ups to this. So did you mean this? You said this, so does that mean this? And so you just have a lot more clarification, and it's a great way to get down to the meat and bones of things. However, a lot of times you only do so many people. So compared to quantitative research, which could have 500 people, because it's very easy accessible and it's all number based, qualitative is a little bit more different, where you only have maybe 10 participants, more of a focus group type setting, where you can have a lot more of a intimate discussion about the topics that you want to discuss. Like I said, the quantitative is all numerical, so it's more acceptable. A lot of people think it's more acceptable. It's more scientific and more explainable. It's a lot easier to say 80% of people said they enjoyed this type of thing, this type of program. That's sound, and that speaks volumes for us. And so that's why we a lot of times use quantifiable data instead of qualitative. But either one would work, either one are good depending on what you want to do. If you really want to get down to the nitty gritty, qualitative is a great method to use, but quantitative is mostly used because of convenience and also because it's usually more accepted by the general public. Some of the data collection processes, or the way that you can get data, there's several different ways. I think I list about 7 or 8 different ones on your PowerPoints, but you can look at it through. I'm just going to go through these pretty quick, excuse me, because they are kind of self-explanatory for the most part. But one might be, it's a purposeful sampling, but you might get a teen advisory board or a citizen advisory board. We kind of talked about that already. Other ones are public meetings. This is what Parks and Recreation people love, because we have a lot of great stories about this, is that when we go to public hearings we get off-the-wall random comments. But that's a great way to collect data. You know, usually when we do a public hearing, we already know what we're going to do. We're going to build a park. Well, how do you guys feel about that? What do you think should be in it? So we know what we're going to do. We just want some feedback, some basic comments. And then, you know, public hearings, sometimes they go a little crazy sometimes. Other ones is focus groups. So again, this is a qualitative data collection process, open-ended questions, and a lot of times it'll be like an open call. So you might put something in a PSA or a newsletter that goes out to the community saying we are considering doing this or this, and if you would like to have input in it, we're meeting on this day. And so it's kind of like a public meeting, but you're doing a little bit more focus group, so you're going to take 5 or 6 of those people that show up and actually sit them down and have a group discussion with them. Interviews and key informants. So a lot of times you're looking for interviews, again, is qualitative, but again you're focusing on great knowledge or somebody that actually knows something about the topic that you want to discuss. And so those are why we call them the key informants, as it gives you the opportunity to get down with people and have an in-depth discussion about that. Usually the important people discussion or the stakeholders of the project. Another one is the observation. We do this in several of our other introductory classes, but observation is a great way because it's no contact. It's going off of what you interpret of what you see. Now you could do this as a quantifiable usually. So a perfect example would be I go to the playground and I want to know how many people use the swing sets. And so I just sit there and I tally as people play. So that's a basic observation, and that will show me that, you know, and to make it even more scientific, I could count how many people are actually there and how many people actually use it within that 1 hour. And so I can say during this 1 hour, we had 30 children playing on the playground, and 28 of those people actually used the swing set. So that, you know, again, gives us quantifiable data that a lot of people like to use. So that's observation. The only thing is that we need to be concerned about this is if I start to interpret different things. That could be a little bit shady, and we might not be as reliable as we'd like to be. And so a perfect example is this. Okay, I'm watching the playground, I'm seeing how many people are playing on the play set, but now instead of just marking them down, I'm going to say, well, he looks like he's 5, so I'm going to put him in this category. He looks like he's 7, put him in this category. She looks like she's 4, I'll put him in that category. So if I start to interpret what I think their ages are, that might not be as reliable because I might not be an expert in human development and understanding those different life stages. So that's a concern. Another one is existing records, and this one, again, it's very easy to access. It's what a lot of the programs already do. We keep track of our numbers, we keep track of our revenues, attendance records, and so we might just go back and look at those, and that might be the evaluation that we do. So say we want to do a new special event, we find something that might be similar to that, and we get the data from them, how many people participated, how many people attended, and that might justify whether or not we should do this new program or not. The most used form, though, that we have in leisure services and really realistically in any type of organization is going to be surveys. So again, it's like a Likert scale usually, or check boxes, and we use this just to, you know, demographics, male, female, you know, you do that aspect, and then will you rate this program? How well did you feel that we met your needs, 1 to 5? And so we do that type of process. Again, the key sections are the demographics because that tells us a lot more. So we might, you know, overall, we might say that 80% of people enjoyed our program. But if we break it down in demographics, we find out that, you know, 20% of males disliked it, or 80% of females liked it. So again, that gives a little bit clearer picture by just having those demographics. And something, again, that goes along with that triangulation method, another method that we use is the Delphi technique, and basically that is a series of surveys. And so it starts out as a qualitative and we transition into a quantitative. And so we might invite a focus group in, for example, of experts in the field, and we'll say, how do you guys feel about this? And then they will respond. And it's an open-ended question. They'll say whatever they want to say. We'll take that back. We'll kind of group it as much as we can, and then we'll send out those responses in groups again to them. They'll send it back again, open-ended responses, and we try to group them a little bit more. And so we're trying to get a consensus. And so it's just back and forth between us, the programmers, and those that are actually experts in the field. The last couple parts of evaluation is basically the data analysis, and this sometimes scares a lot of leisure professionals, but it's something that we need. It's something that we need to have. We need to have those numbers, we need to have those percentages, or in qualitative we need to have those groupings. And sometimes that does scare people away, and realistically for a lot of what we do in leisure services, as long as you know the mean, the medium, the range, the mode, those type of things, those are the basics, statistical, descriptive statistics that you need to know. If you need to know more than that, usually you have to get a consultant, or sometimes you can go to the universities and they'll provide someone for you, usually at free of charge at a university, and they'll give you some descriptive analysis of your data. I put a link down there of national park acreage. If you want to click on that, it will bring up a web page that shows a project that I did on how many acreage the national park system has, and I have it grouped, and it has anything from standard deviation to your mean, median, mode. And so you can look at those type of things. It gets a little bit more complicated that way, and that's what people get scared of. But realistically, if you just understand those, the averages, the modes, the range, those type of things, that's really all you need to have for most reports. If you want more than that, it is available, but otherwise that's what you can look at. So when you're doing an evaluation report, if you go ahead and look at slide number 17, this tells you everything that you should have in there. And so there's really nothing about that that's too earth-shattering or new. Title page, next page is a summary or an abstract, basically just your audience that you were looking for and what did you find overall. Tables, figures, photographs will be the next one, and then your body report. So the purpose of the evaluation, what kind of model evaluation did you use? What kind of questions did you use? What's the description of the program that you are evaluating? What's your background as the investigator? Are you the leader of it? Are you a supervisor? Were you hands-on? Explain some of that. Summary of regulations. So sometimes, again, if you got a grant from somebody's overseeing that funding, you need to provide that information, and so you might want to just write something that this regulation meets this criteria or this accreditation. Your data collection and analysis methods, how did you go about doing that? Your findings, interpretation, and then your recommendations for future use. You might also put in there any supplemental material, waivers, contracts, any of that nature. And so if you go to page 18, well, that evaluation report, that's going to be multiple pages. Sometimes it's going to be a 10-page document depending on how much information you got. Sometimes it could be maybe 2 or 3 pages. But it's going to be a bigger document than what a lot of the public wants to really read. And so when we communicate those evaluations, we want to be quick and brief. Basically, this is the 80% of people participated. Based on these statistics, we are going to make these changes or improvements. If you go to slide 18, there's an example of what a very basic one would be for a preschool baseball program. So you can read through that. The last 2 slides I provide for you in the PowerPoint are basically checklists of things just to double check as you go down through the evaluation process and kind of make sure that you've all your ducks in a row, that you cover all the bases, and that you are doing evaluations correctly and appropriately, and that will give you the most data back so you can make an informed decision about your programs and your agency moving forward. And that's really what we need to be doing. That's really key for any leisure service programmer. So with that, as you can tell, my voice is almost gone, so that's the assessment and evaluation process, how to evaluate, the basic terms and methods that we use in leisure services. And so I'll leave you with that.